My name's Simon Winfield. I'm Managing Director of Hays in the UK and Ireland, and I'm delighted to have all of you join us today and to take you through some of the insights from our recent research into artificial intelligence in the workplace as part of our What Workers Want series. I think all of us are very aware, particularly in the last few months, that artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, has been making the headlines. The rise of generative AI tools such as ChatGPT has made AI more readily accessible than ever before and isn't limited to just those who work within technology. However, the rapid evolution of these tools means there's lots of uncertainty around how it's going to impact the world of work and how work gets done, and in particular by who. So today we're going to be discussing the future of AI in the workplace, how that could look, and provide you with strategies and tips to help you make the best use of artificial intelligence in your organization. So I'm also joined today, and I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Catherine Holden from Tech UK. Catherine joined Tech UK in May 2018 and currently is the Data Analytics, AI and Digital ID programme. Prior to Tech UK, Catherine worked as policy advisor at the Government Digital Service, supporting the digital transformation of UK government. Tim Olsen is Consulting Director for Intelligent Automation and Emerging Technologies at Imposo. Tim, over the last 20 years, experienced bringing leading-edge solutions to organisations and scaled the UK's largest RPA programme. Moderating the panel today is our very own Yvonne Smythe. She's our National Specialism Director for our Human Resources and Legal teams. She's also our Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Practice Lead at Hays. And Yvonne's got over 25 years professional recruitment experience and was featured in the SIA Global 2021, 2022, 2020 and 2019 Global Power 150 Women in Staffing, which recognises female leaders and influencers across the global staffing sector. So thank you all for joining us and offering to be speakers for today and sharing your insights with us. Before we hand over to the panel, though, I'd like to set the scene and take you through some of the insights from What Workers Want research. This year, we based our survey, we had 9,000 employers and employees who shared their views on artificial intelligence in the workplace with us. So firstly, we wanted to find out how AI in the workplace is viewed. And as you can see, our results showed that around half of the respondents think we should be embracing artificial intelligence at work. Staff from younger generations were far more likely to have that view. 55% of the under 30s think AI should be embraced, compared to 45% of the over 50s. And that might suggest that organisations who choose not to embrace AI could find themselves potentially losing out on talent in the future. The benefits that artificial intelligence can bring to organisations include cost savings, process efficiencies, improved productivity. However, our findings also show that while professionals want to embrace AI, only around 4 in 10 trust the use of AI at work. And managing change effectively and alleviating staff fears towards artificial intelligence are going to be crucial if you want to successfully harness any of the benefits that it can bring. One of the burning questions on the topic of artificial intelligence is how is it going to impact the workplace? Generative AI tools have already evolved at a rapid rate, and I'm sure we've all read numerous articles over the last few months, and will no doubt continue to do so. And there are lots of questions still about how much of an impact artificial intelligence is going to have on roles and industries in specific industry sectors. And our research shows that employer views are mixed on how AI will affect the task in their teams and the tasks that their teams carry out. Whilst about a third believe the type of task will change, a similar proportion are also very unsure of the impact. And what over half the employers can agree on, though, is whatever impact AI will have on task, it's going to happen quickly and typically over the next couple of years. So AI is set to impact different industries in different ways, and our survey findings show that both employers and employees believe the top professions that are going to be impacted have a broad range from customer services through to finance, cybersecurity, as you'd expect, education and marketing. And looking at who's using artificial intelligence, only 1 in 5 organisations are currently using AI tools. And the main reasons for not using these tools is lack of awareness or understanding of some of the benefits they can bring. And certainly in some of the recent conversations I think there's been some concerns over intellectual property security and those types of things. But that's all set to change. And I think many employers expect their organizations will allow staff to use AI tools in the future. 2/3 plan to monitor staff usage of artificial intelligence technologies, and only 13% will say that usage will not be monitored. And I think that raises some interesting questions, particularly around transparency, which business leaders are going to need to consider. And certainly we are, as an organization ourselves, having those same conversations as we look at how AI impacts us as a business. And then if employers are facing high levels of skill shortages when it comes to artificial intelligence, and 7 in 10 are saying they don't have, or they don't feel they have the right skills in their workforce to make the best use of artificial intelligence tools and technologies. Employers identified not only technical skills gaps, but soft skills gaps too, such as the ability to adopt change and the ability to learn, particularly around flexibility and adaptability. So despite those skill shortages, though, over half of employees do not think their employers helping them to prepare for the use of AI in the workplace. So I do think employers have got to consider what upskilling support they're going to provide if they're going to successfully integrate AI into their teams going forward, such as investment in training or allowing time for staff to upskill during working hours. The last piece of research I'd like to share and touch on are the areas that employees think are most important for their organization to focus on to ensure that AI is successfully adopted. And top of that list is communication, which helps to raise awareness and support staff through that change. We're certainly, again, as an organization, and I'm sure we'll touch on this in the Q&A later on, these are all the things that, not only are many of you thinking about, but we as a business are thinking about as well. Training is second most important to staff, and to enable them to develop the right skills and knowledge so that they're best equipped to gain all the benefits that AI can bring. Tied in third place is creating the right culture that's open to change and investing in the right technology and resources, and there are a lot of different options out there. And last but not least, a clear strategy when it comes to using AI tools, ensuring their strategic and commercial application. But I'm now going to hand over to our panel, and they're going to be discussing some of these themes in much more detail. So Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And if I could just welcome in Tim and Catherine as well, that would be fantastic. I'll wait for you to appear. And just to finish off, so the report will be available to request as a copy after this webinar, actually. So please do go on to the Hays website, What Workers Want, and request a full copy of the report. So this is a pretty big topic, which is kind of super trending at the moment. And I am delighted to be joined by Catherine and Tim, as Simon previously introduced them. And I'm going to be inviting them to explore with us 6 main areas that we're seeing being spoken about and developed in quite a lot of detail at the moment when we're talking to our customers. So opening question, first of all, and this is going to be to you, Catherine. So as I've said, there's lots of discussions taking place about the use of generative AI at the moment. And we are hearing notes of caution from the godfathers of the tech industry, so including Geoffrey Hinton from Google and Sam Altman himself, the founder and CEO of OpenAI, obviously responsible for the absolutely prolific launch and adoption of ChatGPT, if you can believe it, just on the 30th of November 2022. So is this something we should be excited or fearful about? So Catherine, coming to you first on this, what is your opinion on AI and its impact in the workplace?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me along this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here and to have this discussion, which I think is so poignant and important at this given time. And I would say at the moment, I would agree with you, there's a considerable amount of hype and sort of fear mongering around AI at the moment. And I feel like personally, I can't turn on the news or the radio without some kind of Terminator type news story about how AI is going to destroy the whole of humanity. And I think it's important that we sort of try and ground today's conversation in the reality of where we are at the moment. You know, I think we need to remember that AI is a tool and that it could be used to aid and assist human decision making. You know, albeit that it's a tremendously powerful and effective tool, but it comes with huge opportunities if adopted responsibly. In terms of its impact on the workplace, we're already starting to see AI being used and applied in lots and lots of different situations. So for the purposes of those on the call today, I'm sure within sort of particularly HR practices, we're starting to see a number of different tools and insights being developed through AI, where they're able to provide, I guess, more information around diversity, inclusion and equality efforts by collecting data throughout the employment cycle, including data on training, pay, promotion and performance management. We're also seeing in different sectors AI being able to support health and safety and reducing operational compliance risks. So I'm thinking, for example, the police with the use of their kind of body-worn cameras. And also you'll see a lot of use of AI with monitoring the safety of warehouse workers, for example. So lots of applications across the workforce. We could probably talk about it for many hours, and I know we don't have necessarily the time today, but I think in the future, we're definitely going to see that actually it becomes commonplace for working alongside AI, as we have done working alongside the internet. I think that will be a very kind of common transition in the near to long-term future. And we need to, I think, from my perspective, recognise that there will be a trend towards, at least in the short term, augmentation rather than automation of jobs. Saying that, I think we need to recognise that there will be certain sectors or industries where we will see significant disruption, and there's a need to make sure that we're preparing for those consequences and repercussions now. The final point I'd maybe like to say is that, you know, like all technologies, the use of AI needs to be appropriate, it needs to be proportionate, it needs to be context-based with what we call a strong sort of ethical underpinning from the outset. And like any big digital transformation, it's really important that we bring the employees alongside the employees need to make sure that they bring, the employers along with them throughout the journey, particularly during what could be quite a significant transition. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And just coming back to you on that before I turn to Tim to take his take on it. Yeah, I think Simon mentioned communication and how important this is going to be. You know, the genie is out of the bottle, and clearly there is going to be an impact on the world of work and on jobs, and employees are super aware of this. And so it's going to be really important to make sure that that communication is open and there is a spirit of kind of cooperation and collaboration as we transition into what might look a little bit different in terms of that kind of augmented way of working. So Tim, what's your take on it?
So I think it might be helpful actually just to start with trying to briefly define what AI is. And I think generally speaking, it's an application or a program that has some form of human-like intelligence and is capable of making rational decisions. But the goalposts for AI tend to keep moving. So there's actually a guy called Larry Tesler who has a theorem which says basically AI is whatever can't be done yet. And historically, that's always been true because you know, what we would have called AI 3 or 4 years ago is now commonplace, and we don't really consider it to be AI. But there's no doubt now that all the talk is around generative AI, such as ChatGPT, and they do use neural networks and machine learning to understand language and the world around them. So that is definitely what we would classify as AI. But in theory, generative AI for large language models is really just about predicting text. So just as on your phone, your phone recognizes what the next word should be, really that's all large language models do. But the real problem here, and the reason why perhaps people don't really trust AI, is that even the suppliers don't really know what the neural networks are doing. It's a bit of a black box. And we're starting to see some emergent behaviors coming out of the large language models that hasn't been in the training data. So, for example, one interesting exercise is if you ask a large language model to take a floor tile, a bottle, and a tennis ball and stack them in the most appropriate way and see what answer it comes up with. Because it has to understand, the shape and size of those objects and how they interact with each other. And they are starting to learn how to do that. And yet, nobody has asked them that question before. Well, I might have, but it's highly unlikely to come from the training data. So how are they doing this? There's another example that ChatGPT has learned Persian, and that wasn't in the training data either. So these models are starting to learn very quickly and autonomously, and that makes people both excited and nervous about it as well. So it is important we really control and regulate this development. But there are really 5 key areas of concern, I think. One is around bias. So if you ask many AI models to show you a picture of a CEO, they will show you a middle-aged white male. Yeah, and the danger is it can exaggerate those biases. We've all seen the pictures of Trump supposedly being arrested and the Pope wearing a fashionable jacket. These are deep fakes, and they're very difficult to tell apart from real images. So we have to be very careful about what we're seeing on social media. And applications such as Google Soundstorm now can clone a voice in less than 3 seconds. So we really need to validate and challenge some of the outputs that we're starting to see from AI. Its impact on warfare, of course, we need international regulation on that. And perhaps one of the main issues is the existential risk of a singularity where AI becomes more intelligent than humans and may potentially take over the world. I think there's a lot of different views on that. I don't believe that AI is inherently malicious, but we do need to be careful. We do need to keep nudging it in the right direction as it develops. And finally, of course, there's job disruption. So we can look back at all the different technical revolutions we've seen in history. And generally speaking, what we see is a transition of labor from, for example, agriculture to the mills. And in most cases, the number of jobs hasn't decreased, but there's been a need to transition people and upskill them. And I don't think that's any different. If you look at when word processing came in with desktop PCs, in my first job, we had pools of typists. I know I don't look old enough for that, but we did. And those typists, they may have ended up being secretaries, they may have ended up working in IT, but they had to upskill in order to change their roles to cope with the new technologies that came in. In the long run, I think it's really difficult to make predictions, 10 or 20 years ahead. So I'll hold back from that for now.
10 or 20 years, I think we're talking about probably 12 to 24 months at the moment, aren't we, with the speed of change, Tim? Thank you very much for that. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We've had a couple of questions. So a copy of this recording will be available afterwards. I think we're going to be covering quite a lot of ground, so you may want to just reflect back on that. So we will obviously send a copy of that round to everyone as well. And as I said before, you can access a copy of the survey findings from the What Workers Want after this webinar. So looking at our next theme, which is really around the current utilization of AI. So most organisations aren't currently using AI tools. I think it's about 80%, 1 in 5. we think mainly because of a lack of awareness or understanding of the benefits. I think we're aware of some of the risks, and you've started to articulate those, both of you. But obviously that's not going to be the case, because again, the data shows that most organisations in the fairly near future, near term, are looking to utilise it more, with most planning to monitor usage. So Catherine, in your experience, to what extent are organisations actually using AI? As according to the survey, as I said, only about 20% of organisations are currently using the tools that might be available.
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting question. And when reading through the report, I was quite shocked. Seemingly, I talk about AI day in, day out. To see only 20% sort of adoption rate, I thought that sounded quite low. So I think that's a really interesting statistic to come out of your report today. I think in reality, I mean, I remember there was, I think, a survey that came out by Accenture last year, which showed that actually a majority of organizations are still at a stage where it's very experimental. You know, I think it was something around 60% of organizations are very much at that stage that there's a bit of nervousness, a bit of a hesitancy sort of to actually be showing how these things work in a commercial setting just yet. They are doing a lot of work sort of behind the scenes in that experimental phase. So I think that's what we're starting to see, that we're only just beginning to start to see the benefits of this technology. And the UK, in a very general sense, is still very early on in its sort of adoption journey. But that's not to say that over the next, as you said, 12, 24 months, we're going to see an explosion in this area across all sorts of sectors and markets. So I think it's expected that by 2030, AI could deliver a 10% increase in UK GDP. So huge potential here, and an area that we know that UK government is putting a lot of hopes on in terms of how we kind of ensure that UK productivity sees a bit of an uplift over the next year or so. Saying that though, uptake across sectors is incredibly patchy. So I remember there was some research commissioned by DCMS, or now rebranded as DCIT, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology within government, where they found that actually, whilst 30% of businesses in finance and legal sectors have adopted some form of AI, only 12% have in sectors such as retail and hospitality. So we're starting to definitely see some sectors move in this space really quickly, while others are at the moment lagging behind quite considerably. But even in the most successful sectors, adoption is definitely happening in pockets. So take, for example, healthcare. We're seeing some great examples from some of our members like DeepMind around how they're using AI to, I guess, detect and diagnose diseases more quickly. But actually, it's, you know, the technology AI is very much underutilized in other areas of healthcare. Take, for example, the triaging of NHS waiting lists. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is very much a patchwork of adoption across the UK, but we will start to see significant acceleration very, very soon.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Catherine. I'm going to move on to the next theme we're going to look at, which is something you've already picked up on, Tim, which is around trust and trusting the technology. So our findings show that both employers and employees think we should embrace the use of generative AI within the workplace, but it doesn't necessarily translate into trust. So Tim, to what extent do you think that we can trust AI at this stage and perhaps going forwards? And how can organizations create an environment where the use of AI is more widely adopted and trusted? So embrace and trust.
Okay, so I think, you know, as we discussed, at the moment, AI is really just another tool to improve productivity and augment workers. But with any technological revolution, there is always some disruption, and there will inevitably be mistrust. People fear change, but what's really behind the fear of change is the fear of the unknown. You know, if people don't know what the outcome is going to be and how something is going to impact them, then they will be resistant to it. So what we really need to get over is that fear of the unknown. And the way to do that is, you know, organizations need to create a safe and nurturing environment for their employees to use AI. where there are issues with sensitive data, personal data, commercial data, etc., organizations may look to provide ring-fence solutions so that data isn't going to be made public. They must create very clear guidelines and communicate those guidelines so staff know, where to draw the line, what they can do, what they can't do, what data they can use. And they really need to be transparent with their employees. If employees feel that there is, an agenda that they're not aware of, then that will cause resistance. So there needs to be transparency. There needs to be discussions between the organization and the employees, telling them what the aim is of using it. And I think another area is there are certain sectors in society that are more mistrustful of AI than others. And we have to be really careful that when we're communicating to employees and training employees, we need to do that comprehensively. So no sectors are left out, because otherwise it's just going to broaden that the skills gap and the acceptance of the technology. So we have to make sure that everybody's on a level playing field and everybody gets the same opportunities. I think in the slightly longer run, we need to look at our strategy for upskilling and developing employees. And I think finally, we also need to provide forums or mediums for employees to feed back to the organization and have the opportunity to influence change in the way that AI is being used.
Thank you for that, Tim. And you've touched on a couple of times now around the kind of impact on jobs, and perhaps the fear associated with that, with a pivoting around roles that will remain current and relevant. I'd like to focus us on the optimistic side, which is future jobs, so job creation that's going to be coming from this, so the opportunity. Our research shows that, yes, there are going to be a number of sectors and industries that are impacted either negatively or positively with the wider rollout of AI. So from finance through to education and marketing. But inevitably new jobs will be created. So Tim, where do you think that AI is likely to trigger the creation of new jobs?
Okay, so let's try and take a balanced look at this. So a couple of years ago, if you were to ask me what areas will automation impact and AI impact, I would have said, blue collar roles and simple tasks. But obviously now we're seeing generative AI, it's impacting white collar roles and more creative tasks. But it's not all bad news. The World Economic Forum put out a report recently, which is really worth reading. And they look at all the different roles that will be impacted by AI. But what they actually said, the conclusion they come to is that over the next 5 years, you will actually have a net gain in the number of roles as a result of the introduction of AI. Now, of course, there will be negative impacts there. As you've already said, office administration, legal, marketing, I think in particular, customer care. And also we're seeing developers' roles impacted by generative AI as well now. So there are a number of areas where, inevitably there will be negative impacts and disruption. But we will also see new roles coming through. We're seeing AI engineers, we're seeing a growth in machine learning engineers. All the data that goes into AI needs to be managed. So data analysts, we're seeing a huge growth in that area. But it's not only technical roles as well. So AI ethicists, for example, trainers, there'll be a greater need for communications. And then you've got all the roles that go around AI. So cyber, infrastructure, cloud, virtual reality, physical and software robotics. So there's a whole industry really that's growing around AI to support it. I think just one thing I will say, there's an awful lot of hype in the media around prompt engineers, and there are different views on that. I'm less convinced that that will be a massive role going forwards. I think the way that generative AI is going, it will be very user friendly, and the need for AI whisperers, if you like. I'm just not convinced that that is something that will grow beyond a very, very niche application. But another thing to look at as well is that actually the introduction of AI may potentially lower the bar to enter some new careers. And I'll give you an example, although I'm not necessarily suggesting that this is one that we should do, but GPT has been shown to be very effective in medical diagnoses. So there is an argument to say, look, if you're struggling to train doctors and bring doctors on, why not augment them with a large language model? And potentially you could lower the entry bar for that role. It's just one example. Similar with developers as well. We can get AI to do some of the legwork. So perhaps it could be a bit easier to get into that role now. But overall, the medium-term issue is not going to be the number of jobs. We will still have as many jobs, if not more. The problem will be having the skills to fill the new jobs. And unlike with previous technical revolutions, this one is happening incredibly quickly. So the real issue is the lag to upskill people from the old roles to the new. And that is a huge problem. Just before I finish on this point, though, there is a really interesting use case that I'll make you aware of. IKEA have recently introduced a chatbot called Billy, a bit like their shelves, to handle half of their customer care calls that come in. And that's impacted 8,500 customer care agents. However, rather than making them redundant, they've actually retrained them as interior designers. And they've now opened up a completely new revenue stream for the organization. And I think that's an absolutely fantastic example of sustainable automation within an organization.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was a very full answer. And I think you've started to explore the next theme, which was actually around upskilling, reskilling, and staying relevant, both as an organization with your employees, but also as an individual. So Tim, I'm going to just kind of circle back on that if I can a little bit, just to say, what are your thoughts on the steps that employers can take? And I will come to Catherine as well on this. But first of all, Tim, the steps that employers can take to access individuals with the skills they require for those new jobs on the basis, it sounds like they're going to be kind of hot-baked, let's just say, and you're not going to necessarily have the complete skill set you're after.
I think the first thing I would say is, putting salary to one side for a minute, is if you're trying to attract people to your organization, why do they want to come and work for you versus your competitors? How can you make yourselves really stand out? So clearly salary is one area. It has to be competitive, but it's not the be all and end all. I think with a lot of technical roles now, we're seeing fewer and fewer of those being 100% office-based. So the ability to offer hybrid or even remote working is, to be honest, I would suggest it's a must, really. And we're even seeing fewer boundaries now, in that you don't just have to look in the UK, you can look abroad and internationally for talent as well. And, we're all used to using Teams and Zoom now. So the boundaries that used to be there a few years ago are no longer there. And that's opened up a whole new world of possibilities. But I would also say, perhaps look at unused or underutilized sources that perhaps we haven't used as much as we should in the past. So What I mean by that is perhaps increased diversity, increased inclusion, perhaps look at neurodiverse candidates, older candidates, less able candidates, and of course provide the flexibility around those roles as well to help you attract those people. We need to be upskilling from within, but also we need to be, trying to find new potential out there as well. And that doesn't necessarily have to come from, typical universities. I think we should be looking at apprenticeship schemes. And I think finally, the one other thing I would say that really tends to attract candidates is having a sense of purpose and being able to apply tech for good. Public sector organizations frequently struggle to attract candidates because they can't offer the same levels of salary. But, where there is a real sense of purpose and an ability to get a lot of job satisfaction, that goes a long way.
Thanks for that, Tim. And Catherine, if I could just ask you to share your reflections on that with the community of employers and individuals that you support and work with daily. I mean, what can organisations do to ensure that their staff are trained and equipped with the skills that they need, the skills that Tim's talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, distilling it down, fundamentally one of the most sort of important questions, I think, that we'll discuss today. And, I think it's a question that, many businesses should be asking internally right now and having those conversations. We know that the skills shortage is a huge problem. At Tech UK, we run an annual survey where we kind of survey all of our members, so that's over 1,000 industry players, to identify where they see the lay of the land, where are the opportunities in tech, and where are the risks or the challenges. And year on year, that skills shortage comes back as the biggest barrier to adoption, particularly for AI in the UK. So it's fundamentally one of the biggest challenges that we're grappling with now. And I'd completely agree with Tim's point about the fact that actually new jobs will be created, but it's about how do we ensure that the existing sort of individuals that are working within our workforce are equipped and skilled to be able to be placed into those jobs, and done so in a way that is meaningful and satisfying, etc. I think there's probably a few key areas that organisations should be focusing on right now, one of which we've spoken about already slightly, which is around providing upskilling and retraining of staff. We know that actually within organisations, our best asset is our people, and actually those that work for us are tremendously loyal, and actually it's important that we are looking at investing in people to ensure that they have the right skills to be able to adapt to some significant changes that could happen in the work environment. And it's certainly from an employer perspective, probably still works out as cheaper to actually look at investing in the staff you've got now, rather than going through a very expensive recruitment process to bring in new talent. So that's absolutely key. And as Tim said, I don't think it's just about technical expertise. We need to make sure that we have multi-skilled, diverse teams, which of course combine the technical expertise, but also bring in other capabilities such as the legal knowledge, the ethicists, as you said, the people with that sort of civil society background, but also kind of that commercial business experience as well, will be absolutely fundamental to those AI teams. And just to give you an example of where we've known that's been really effective in terms of sort of upskilling and retraining staff, one of our members, Uber, has established a partnership with the Open University to provide free and flexible degree courses. And I think they also provide access to free short courses for their drivers, and I think also one family member as well. And that really is there to sort of support flexible learning and enable these individuals to learn around maybe other commitments that they have day to day. Two kind of other final things I just want to mention. One is around, I think there's a real need, particularly in the AI space, to create AI career pathways so that those that are maybe centered within an organization have a really clear understanding of what the next steps are in terms of their promotions. And I think that's really motivating, seeing that really clearly. And I think because this is still an area that's relatively nascent, people often within an organization can't always see where their job or their career is heading. And therefore, retention becomes a problem and people move on to jobs elsewhere. So I think signposting those different ways to progress within an organization, but also to enter the sector and show the diversity of routes that are available to achieve those goals, I think is really key. And then the final point, I think, which is really important that organizations must be kind of considering is, how you take those members of staff along in that digital transformation journey. So again, Tim's mentioned things like, how do you regularly update staff, in the form of workshops or town hall type sessions, so that people have that opportunity to ask questions freely and feel like the technology is being built to support and aid them rather than being, built against them. I think that's really important. And I remember Gartner did a really interesting study which showed that just by explaining the scope and the purpose of the technology, it can boost employees' acceptance of the practice by about 70%. So this is something that can't be swept under the rug. It's a really, really important thing that employers consider doing now.
Catherine, thank you for that. And I'm going to come to both of you very shortly to ask for some closing remarks on a couple of different angles. Catherine, you've started to pick up on some of those in terms of employer actions. But before I do that, I just wanted to invite our listeners today, our audience today, if you do have some questions, please do post them into the chat or the Q&A as is shown on your screen, and we've allowed time for some questions at the end. So to now have a look at really some of the key takeaways. We've covered a lot of ground on today's call, and there is a lot of stuff that's coming at us both individually as professionals navigating the world of work, and also employers trying to make sure we're future-proofing our businesses. So to close our discussion, I'd like to ask for your opinions on a couple of things, if I may. One for individuals, one for employers. So Tim, first of all to you, from an individual's perspective, what advice would you give to individuals who want to start really engaging with AI as a professional tool?
So I think the first thing to say really is that AI literacy is going to become as prevalent a requirement as Microsoft Office is. It will be something that every candidate is going to need to have to stay relevant, really. But the good news is that you're not going to have to be highly technical to use it, because the user interface is very straightforward and it understands natural language. So, that's fantastic news for all of us. So as an individual, I would say just become familiar with all the tools that are out there, really. You can use GPT, you can use Bard, Anthropic's Claude, you can use image generators such as DALL-E and Midjourney. There's a great website out there at the moment called Poe, which is spelled P-O-E. And if you register on that, you actually have access to a number of these different solutions, and you can try them side by side. So that works really well. And see how you can use them to improve your productivity, whether it's drafting emails, creating blogs for social media, sales content, helping you to do research, education, homework, lesson plans, language translation, any day-to-day tasks. And whilst I'm conscious of what I said before about prompt engineers, but there is a little bit of a skill in about refining your prompts to get the best results. So yes, you should practice that until you get some really good results coming out. And I think we're going to start seeing more integrated solutions coming through as well. So Microsoft 365 is going to have Copilot soon, and that's going to be heavily based on generative AI. And that will have access to your personal information, and it will do things like creating presentations for you based on the actions of meetings that you've had. So that's going to be really interesting, and that will just expand your AI toolbox, really. So it's about just going out there and familiarizing yourself and playing with the different tools that are available. But there are some risks, and I think it's important to be aware of those. So, you should stay within any guidelines that are set by your organization. You should never be putting in sensitive data unless the solution is highly ring-fenced. And also be aware that generative AI can and does hallucinate. It can come up with some very compelling answers that are just completely and utterly wrong. It can exaggerate bias. So there's always a need to fact check independently. And I think if I had to give one piece of advice about how to use AI, I would say I would treat it as an unreliable intern, as someone who can go away, do lots of legwork for you, but then when it brings it back, you have to check it. So that would be my piece of advice, I think.
Love that. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Tim. And Catherine, from the employer side, particularly looking at the role of leaders here, what advice would you give them when they want to start building out an AI strategy when it comes to embedding AI within their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a really big task for an individual, of any leader, to undertake from any organization, particularly as a number of these individuals won't necessarily have the background or understanding or expertise themselves personally, on AI. So I first and foremost recognize that this is quite a big challenge for a lot of companies to undertake. So I guess I have sort of 5 steps that I would probably recommend to any organization looking at what AI could maybe do for their organization. The first is, I think, is actually the need to be really challenge-led, actually. What is the issue you're trying to resolve here? And first and foremost, is AI the best solution? In a lot of cases, I talk to industry players and they'll say, I really want to adopt this new shiny, jazzy piece of AI technology, when actually the challenge they're looking to try and resolve could be resolved very simply with a data analytics tool, and it would be very effective and much more cost effective. So first of all, it's always important to be challenge-led. What are you trying to resolve? What are you trying to solve first? I think second, once you've identified that maybe AI is a potential option to support the challenge you have at hand, is to get your data in order. My goodness, this is a big undertaking, but so valuable and important. So that's looking at how your data within your organization is stored and how it's processed. And this will lead to, I guess, higher quality data sets, which enable you to have better quality insights when using AI. So that's really, really, really important. Get your fundamentals right, get your foundations right. I think third, we've spoken about this already, it's become a bit of a theme, but we said about engaging with all your staff from the beginning of the process. That's really important. That can't be overlooked at all. So bring them in right from the beginning before you're even using the technology, and ensure that they are included. I think fourth is around really ensuring that you start small and build. So find an issue, as I said, where AI might be able to support or find an answer, and then test and monitor its progress before scaling. But don't try and set out a huge flashy AI strategy and try and make sure that it's unlocking lots of opportunities across your organization. Start small and build. Can't emphasize that more. And then finally, I think it's really important that companies don't work in isolation. Seek help when you need it. So there's lots of existing guides and practices out there, lots of organizations like ourselves at Tech UK as trade associations, but also other bodies such as the Turing, Digital Catapult, lots of resources from within government as well, and more to come as well. So I just say, don't suffer in silence, and make sure you're learning from others' best practice and building on that.
Thank you so much for that, Catherine. Gosh, we really have covered a lot, haven't we? So I've been having a look at some of the questions that have been coming in, and actually we are covering off quite a lot of responses in what's been coming through. There are some sector role specific inquiries that have been coming through. I would encourage you perhaps to reach out to your Hays contact to maybe have an initial conversation if you've got something that's very specific to an industry or a particular role type, and we can have a look at that and explore it with you. Looking at perhaps something we haven't addressed within the discussion we've just had. This is from Callum Deans, and it says, and I think it's really pertinent, has consideration been given to what entry-level roles are going to look like in the future? Young and inexperienced workers are likely to feel the impact of this disruption period. I think that's a really, really important point. Tim, perhaps I can go to you first, and then Catherine, if there's anything more to add on that.
Yeah, I do think it's a really good point, actually. So I spoke before about developers, and the sort of roles that we're seeing impacted most there are the junior roles, because you know, you can ask GPT to go away and provide code for a certain action. You put that in using natural language and it comes back with the code, and it can find bugs, it can run tests on code, and these are all the sorts of you know, actions that you would ask of a junior developer. There's still absolutely a need for the more senior developers, but I suppose the question is, well, how do you get to a role of senior developer if the role of junior developer is being done by GPT or something similar? And I think that's a really good question. And I hope the answer is that we will still take on junior developers, but actually they will accelerate more quickly through their career to a more strategic level. So it's a good question, and I don't think we really have all the answers to that, but we have to be aware of, you know, the fact is that in the majority of cases, you know, legal interns, etc. as well, it will probably be the junior roles that are impacted most. And we do need to give consideration to how that impacts careers and whether, you know, whether it's actually possible to accelerate people's careers as a result of that.
Thank you for that. Catherine, I'm actually going to give you another question, if I may, on it. Not necessarily on entry-level roles. So I think we've got a few really great questions here. A lot of our audience will be HR professionals facing into, you know, the workforce and having the kind of dual masters, if you like. So one of the questions has come up, and perhaps I could direct this to you. So we've mentioned the use of AI in HR type responsibilities and roles. What AI do you see the HR teams using now and in the future? And how is that balanced with data and information security, something that we are actively considering here at Hays at the moment as well?
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, a really, really good question. So I think we have to recognise that, and I always have to remind people of this, that actually in the UK, we have a very solid and robust regulatory regime. So when it comes to data protection and, you know, data security and some of the issues or concerns people have with personal data, that is squarely sort of within the remit of GDPR, and AI and any other emerging technologies that come in the future will still be held to those standards, and therefore, you know, there's a very high bar that needs to exist for people to be able to use this technology in a way that's sort of responsible. And actually, I think it was the ICO, so the regulator, the Information Commissioner's Office, has come out since the advent of generative AI and a lot of the acceleration in that space to say, look, whilst this technology is progressing at pace, don't forget that actually there is existing regulation that exists. Question mark in the future whether it needs to be sort of strengthened or at least promoted so people have a greater awareness of it, but regulation in this space does exist. So making sure you're completely aware of the rules and regulations that exist in this space is a really important place to start. I think the other question was around sort of the tools in which would be kind of used in the future. Well, we're already starting to see I think a lot of HR departments find that their work is being augmented through various different platforms. So I know one that a lot of people use is the Workday HR finance and planning platform. And that really puts AI and machine learning at its core. And it's able to sort of automate tasks, support businesses and workers to understand and act on their skills needs, and draw insights from workforce data to support decision making. So I think we're already starting to see, particularly within the HR space, this being an area where we are starting to see that augmentation. And you know, I think we'll only start to see that accelerate across more organizations, and they'll start to see the benefits in a very short space of time.
Thanks, Catherine. And actually, just responding to that, we do have a dedicated workday practice here at Hays. So if anyone is thinking about that, we have teams on hand to help you design and implement and roll that out. Just quickly from both of you, if I may, I'll probably start with Tim on this one. One last question. You mentioned deepfakes, and we've touched on the topic in the area of trust. So this is the question. So with deepfakes and voice synthesizers, how will we be able to identify what is human and what is AI created? And will it phase into a tech war around authentication in terms of what is what? So your thoughts on that, Tim? Thanks,
Yvonne.
A nice gnarly one.
Yeah. Good question. As I said before, you know, Google Soundstorm is just launched, and that can clone a voice almost perfectly within about 3 seconds of sampling. It's an incredible technology. So it's a huge problem. There are some rumblings in the industry about particularly around regulation, about whether we should identify when something isn't human, when it's artificial. And I think that's a really good idea, actually, and I strongly suspect we will end up doing that. But that's only great if people follow the laws and the regulation. I think you're always going to have some rebellious people on social media or whatever creating these deep fakes. So that will always be the problem, those who fall outside of the regulation. And I think, you know, we all need to be diligent to that and try to challenge and question anything that we see come up that hasn't been verified. So it is going to be an ongoing issue, I'm afraid.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And Catherine, 30 seconds on.
Yes, I was going to say I'll keep it very short, although it probably warrants a much longer answer. So yeah, absolutely, deepfakes, you know, is a huge topic at the moment, particularly with, you know, an upcoming general election. The issue of trust and truth, you know, lots to unpack there. Yes, there is a bit of an arms race going on, but some people say that means we should stop using AI, but actually AI is going to be part of the solution. So actually, it's, as Tim said, it's looking at those labeling solutions that already exist, and they're already existing out there. So it's about how do we develop those and make them more well established across society. So one plug would be Adobe has this brilliant labeling tool, which is able to identify when a picture has been tampered with. And you can basically, by clicking on the picture or hovering over it, it will show you everything that's been done to that picture since the original source. And there's a number of initiatives that exist out like that. It's just building on those and making sure they are better known about, I guess.
Catherine, thank you so much. I'm going to draw things to a close. My huge thanks to both Catherine and Tim for their amazing insights. You more than outdid yourselves. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you to Simon for sharing the headline results of the What Workers Want report. You can access that report by going to hays.co.uk/What Workers Want. That will be available very shortly after this webinar in a request a copy format, so you will then hear from a Hays consultant. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. I hope that you found this helpful by way of insight. It helps you to future plan for yourself and for your organisation. We are here at Hays on hand to assist you in any way we can in what is a pretty complex area at the moment. We are also looking forward every day. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy your lunch and the rest of your afternoon. And thank you again very, very much to Catherine, Tim, Simon, and the team at Hays who have put the report together. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.